Hi there, and welcome back to Starting Up and Right, Conversations with a Startup CFO. I am your co-host, Trey Nicholson, and joining me to my right on your screen is Ryan Keating. Ryan, how are you?
Good, Trey. Good to see you. Good to be back.
Good, yeah. Good to see you again. Well, this is going to be a fun episode. The special guest today is a friend of both of ours, Mr. Deepak Gupta. You've worked with Deepak on and off for several years. I've known Deepak for several years. If you don't mind, just kind of tee up Deepak with your experience with him, and we'll bring him on screen to kind of introduce himself in just a second.
Yeah, I'm excited to have Deepak today. As you mentioned, we go back 10 years or more. I originally met Deepak where he was an investor and a client that I was a CFO for, and we just hit it off. And then we actually did a lot of work together. Deepak was one of our consulting CFOs for a good amount of time while he was building his role at Berkeley and Haas, and is now the general partner and managing partner for the Blue Bear Ventures Fund, which is really exciting. So I'm excited to have him on today.
Yeah, great. Well, with that, let's bring Deepak on screen. Hey, Deepak, welcome to the show, man. Thanks for joining. Good to see you.
Thank you, Trey. Thank you, Ryan. Happy to be on. And my name is Deepak Gupta. I'll just do a quick intro again. So I'm a general partner at Blue Bear Ventures. We've been around since 2017. We've invested in about 20 deep tech companies coming from the university ecosystem. As Ryan said, Ryan and I go back a while. I was a consulting CFO for Ryan for many, many years, and as well as worked with Ryan at Berkeley Haas. He helped me in a couple of my classes at Berkeley, so that was pretty good.
That was fun.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I remember that. I remember you gave Ryan rave reviews for the class, so I guess he did okay.
You were the one that gave me the review. Nice, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, well, Deepak, one of the reasons I think it's going to be real interesting for the audience to hear from you today is just your path through, starting out in finance and then going into deep startup finance, interim CFO and working with models and helping with fundraising and even helping early startups piece together their early accounting and finance and board packages, all the way to your experience then with helping students, entrepreneurial students and MBA students at Berkeley Haas School, and now all the way to Blue Bear Ventures, where you find yourself not only funding startups but fundraising again for your own fund. So yeah, I think your perspective is going to be very interesting here. So yeah, we're excited to get started.
No, absolutely. And I appreciate that. I mean, it's been quite a journey in that sense that we started back, I could talk about Blue Bear, but coming back to myself, I think the late 90s when I actually joined a startup. And my background was engineering. So I started in R&D and then moved into manufacturing and then realized I was doing sales. So I did sales as well as business development. And I did startup for about 10 years, four different startups, as well as worked at a big Fortune 100 company for a short time. After that, I went to business school. And I think when it came to finance, post-business school, I worked for a venture fund called Hercules Capital, where we did a lot of debt and equity lending. And I did a lot of stuff in finance in terms of balance sheet, income statements. I remember initially, getting companies and rebuilding everything from scratch, their balance sheet, their income statement, their cash flow. And I probably have done it for at least 1,000 companies at Hercules. And Ryan can probably relate, your bread and butter comes in building models and really understanding models before you become a CFO. So I think it was really a stomping ground for me to understand how models are made and understand what cash is going and, when debt crosses cash and what happens. So it was a really good, I think, learning curve for me. From there, I actually started a bank, which was BBVA Ventures in 2011, 2012. And I was with BBVA for 2 years. I did a lot of investing in big data as well as other kind of companies, but we were actually LP at 500 startups. That relationship, I kind of took over at 500 startup and started really working with seed stage companies. I did that for about 2 years, and then slowly I was helping Alchemist and a couple of other accelerators Next thing I know, I had an offer from two guys from BlackRock to say, why don't you leave BBVA and start your own venture fund? And, I couldn't kind of skip that opportunity. So I kind of joined them trying to raise a venture fund. Long story short, that didn't go that well. And next thing I know, I'm started consulting with Ryan in terms of doing some work as a CFO. And then I also joined Berkeley Haas, which was a recommendation from somebody at 500 Startups that, Deepak should be helping out both venture experience and startup experience. So that's basically how I got into Berkeley Haas. And next thing I know, we are connected at Citrus Foundry, which is one of the accelerators at Berkeley. And that brought me to Blue Bear Ventures. So I could, stop right there.
One of the things I've admired about both of you guys is your willingness to lend your time to students and young startup founders and guide them. That's part of just something it seems like you guys enjoy doing. Ryan, maybe you go first. What is that about? What is it about helping young startup founders that gets you excited? Why do you do that?
I enjoy it. I feel good being able to get in and mentor and help students. And, quite honestly, when I started out in this industry, very similar to Deepak, it was, late 90s, where I really started working with startups. It's really an accumulation of just things that I've seen and situations I've been able to participate in. And I love being able to maybe share some of my lessons with people to help them perhaps avoid some of the mistakes or capitalize on some of the opportunities. And if I can simply regurgitate what I have learned and it's helpful to somebody else, I'm happy to do that all the time. I mean, especially with students. The reason I really focused my company around startups specifically is I love working with the passion of the entrepreneur. And you see that, and to be able to have a 30-minute conversation with a young entrepreneur and really see that you're adding value, that's something I really enjoy. And so like when Deepak's been able to bring me into his class at Haas, that was something I really liked, and even kept in touch with some of the students, and they would reach out to me directly and ask me for some input and advice. And I've just always enjoyed that. I figure, I've been fortunate to create the situations or be in the situations that I have been. And if I can share some of those lessons, it's something that I'm always happy to do.
Yeah, Deepak, how about you? You've kind of levitated or gravitated toward the, helping the students and especially your role there at Haas at Berkeley.
Yeah, in the past 6 years or 7 years now, I have probably seen everything in terms of students, in terms of their approach, in terms of saying, should I start a company, join a startup, all the numbers. And
they're so cute at that age, right?
Yeah, exactly. They want to take over the world, right?
Yeah.
So it's great to understand, and I think for me that euphoria at that age is incredible because some of these students do succeed, and they do get a company off the ground, or they raise seed, they get a Series A. So to see that process and to go through it, and to Ryan's point, to be able to say, oh, I remember, someone a couple of years ago who went through this, and this is what they did. So again, we're not getting anything out of it other than just sending the information. This is the process we need to carry through to get it to a certain stage. So that has been incredible gratitude to me personally, because I feel like I'm actually giving back to the community.
Sure. Yeah, very cool. Yeah, well, I've got to think that's got to be, they're young, they're ready, they're energetic, they're going to change the world. They've got this idea, but they're probably a little bit intimidated about what they don't know. And for you guys to be able to at least lay out the path, guide them occasionally, that's got to be rewarding. And let's talk, dig in a little deeper than Deepak at what's going on at Haas and the entrepreneurship, the MBA program there. How did they pull you in? You mentioned that with a 500 startups introduction, and what'd you see over there? How'd you become embedded there and become a central piece of that program?
So back in 2014, actually, the funding came from one of the alumni for me in terms of they wanted to see somebody who's an on-site mentor. And, all these accelerators have mentors. So using the same analogy, they wanted to see somebody who's physically there whenever students need something, right? So it's not teaching in class or anything. It's more about one-on-one and any kind of problem, from not just fundraising or pitch deck, but even talk about, co-founder issues or issues dealing with, trying to find accounting firms, trying to find anything. So they wanted someone physically be available. So the way they tracked me for the first 6-7 months was every time I saw someone, they actually reviewed me and reviewed what kind of performance I was giving back, right? Because the alumni wanted some kind of metrics. So I probably had, and I'm making this number up, but I probably met 100 students, 150 students in the first 6 months, and all of them, not even one, gave me a negative review. It was
Wow.
5 out of 5. And not even that, some of them said my MBA is worth it because of Deepak. I mean, that their small recommend, so
That's awesome.
the dean actually was like, and holy X, we should get someone like Deepak to be here all the time, because that's the value that Deepak can provide to our students. And I can show you reviews for the past 5 years. I might have 1-4, but majority are 5. So for me, that personally kind of builds a brand and my, reputation, but trust as well. Because every time I see a student, I'm kind of in that stage. Oh, I need to perform or overperform to make sure I keep my reputation. Right?
I've seen that in you. I've seen you dig in and dig in deep. With even with I remember. Well, you have an astonishing memory for details and and never forget this. Somebody's story. I've seen that, but
Yeah, that engineering and finance combination is brutal. It's so valuable. I mean, it's a great skill set that you have. Yeah. So
I remember way back when I was at school back in Texas. I did some time at Texas A&M and University of Texas, and those are, especially Texas A&M, very research heavy university, and you've got huge research, going on in the department. And and back then though, there were they would develop programs to give grants to commercialize the research.
Yes.
But it always kind of seemed the research was the big word there. And over the years, I've noticed now, all of these universities now seem to have an entrepreneurship program, and even perhaps a funding alternative kind of centered around that program to help them get started. It was kind of a shift. Now, I'm not sure when it happened. It probably evolved, and here we are looking back on it. It seemed like it happened. What's your perspective? You guys' perspective on that? How are the universities over the past, I guess, 20 years? That's fair enough. We don't go back further than that when I was in school, but
Sure. So, what we have seen at Berkeley, and I could talk about it at MIT and other, schools in the Northeast as well in Southern California, entrepreneurship has changed a lot in the past 10 years. So before, in the late 90s and even in the early 2000s, late 2000s, you saw students getting a master's, PhDs, and then going towards research, right? Traditional routes. They want to be professors. They wanted to, go work in academia, or they wanted to work at a big organization doing bench research and publishing papers. What we saw post 2008, 2009, and especially in 2010 and moving forward, is a lot of these master's and PhD students were like, no, I don't want to go the traditional route anymore. I want to look at, I want to look at entrepreneurship as a route to really figure out one of the ways I can really go towards that direction instead of traditional directions. So I think the change has happened recently in the past 10 years. And we don't just see that in Berkeley or in the UC ecosystem, but we see that nationwide. I mean, and more so you can see starting 2013, 2015, this word called deep tech. And what is deep tech? Deep tech can mean so many things at different places, but basically deep tech is companies that are based in research and emerging technologies that are coming out of these universities. And could be in a bio, could be in climate, could be in anything, could be in wireless technology. We talk about 5G. We can talk about so many different research-based companies that are coming out, and that's coming out all over the country, right? So I think a lot of these students who are putting in the time into research, Now they're looking at research. How do I commercialize this? How do I make money from this?
Yeah.
And that's a shift that's been happening in the past 10 years.
Yeah, 10 years ago, like universities now, a pitch contest is pretty common. I know Rice has a big pitch contest. They all have their little entrepreneur, and they actually have startup. These kids want to be startup founders. That's what they've got the ideas. They've got some great abilities and great ideas. But yeah, it's just shifted. It's so fun to watch.
Just to add to that, since we've been doing this, we've really seen the role of the university shift, as Deepak's saying. Like we've seen a few different flavors of how universities get involved. Like the kind of the furthest removed, we've seen where universities will have like alumni investment clubs, where it's just, connected people from a university sharing deal flow. The university itself is not that involved, more of an arm's length affiliation. And then we've seen universities that are actually putting their own endowment funds to work inside of investments. So looking to basically grow their endowments. A lot of times they will be slanted towards, companies springing out of the universities, but not necessarily. And then you have what Deepak is involved in, which to me has been the biggest shift, where the universities have said, hey, and Deepak put it perfectly, the students there have seen his involvement as a mentor and as a guide worth the price of admission, especially if their goal is to launch a company. So now you see the universities really getting engaged, where they're giving these students, which are creating startups, a path from graduation to what comes next, through funding, through mentorship, through really fostering that creation of the startup. And it's a big shift that's been really interesting to see. And part of this, and I wonder, kind of a question to Deepak, part of where I saw the concern 5, 6, 7 years ago in talking with universities was they were really trying to figure out how to keep that graduating entrepreneur associated with the university or close to the university, where before what would happen is people would graduate, want to be an entrepreneur. So the first thing they would do is pack up their bags and head to the Bay Area. And they're basically maybe an alumni that when they're successful will give back. But there wasn't a lot of continuity. There wasn't a lot of fostering from the universities to help facilitate this path. And I love what like Blue Bear is doing. And we are seeing this with other universities as well. So yeah, Deepak, I'd love to hear, is it kind of a deliberate kind of intent to really kind of, or is it opportunistic or both, right? Is it like, here's an opportunity for us to make some, money on these, brilliant ideas? Yeah. Or, as you've seen, you're really giving back to the students and maybe giving them an opportunity that they wouldn't otherwise have.
Yeah. I mean, definitely what you said in the latter resonates, because we're giving back to the students and we're trying to figure out how that innovation happens and what's going on there. Because I think, as all three of us know, in the past 20, 30 years, and we've seen this, students really can do stuff at a certain age that we're even, oh, wow, that can be done, right? And we've seen that repeatedly. So we are actually one of the ones who are funding or seeding them, maybe not in money, but in terms of the process. And I think that's really important for these students to grow. While you both were just talking, I was thinking about University of Wisconsin. I just talked to their alumni office, and they have an incredible endowment as well that has been, pumping money in for the past 5 to 10 years, exactly to your point, Ryan, into entrepreneurs coming out of the university. And then how do I keep them local, right? Mm-hmm. They're like, we can get them $500,000, $1 million, $5 million checks, but let's keep them local as long as possible. We realize that they will want to go to the East Coast or West Coast eventually, but if we can grow that ecosystem in Wisconsin, then we can say, okay, they are at a certain stage, and we do want to co-invest with investors on either coast, but we want them to come to Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a messaging, a lot of universities, what they're trying to do is create that ecosystem to a certain stage before they have to go somewhere else.
Makes a lot of sense, right? That those graduating students, trying to keep them in that community It leads to startup jobs, which pulls in more investment money, which pulls in more students. I mean, it makes a lot of sense.
Exactly.
Upward spiral. Yeah. Now, Deepak, you guys you've kind of got Berkeley at the center of Blue Bear Ventures, but you've extended that to the kind of the entire UC system.
Yes.
In your focus.
We are definitely looking at all 5 UCs. We have them for the past 7 years, and these are Northern California universities. But for Fund 2, we have branched out because, as you can see, the professors are not staying in the UC ecosystem. They move themselves. So, we are getting referrals from UT Austin. We get from, University of Chicago. We get from the Northeast, because these professors that were part of the UC ecosystem are moving. So it's natural for us to rely on our network and reputation to get the deals, right? So absolutely, we're open to a lot of different universities.
You guys, you're always fundraising, Deepak, and so you're currently working on your second fund for Blue Bear Ventures. What's the size of that? What are you guys excited about? What's your charter? What's your investment themes? Tell us a little bit more about Blue Bear Ventures and what you're up to lately.
So, in terms of fundraising, there are a lot of funds, micro funds. So these are sub $100 million funds out there. There are a lot of emerging managers. So there's a lot of noise out there. We could talk about 2 different things. We could talk about fundraising in terms of LPs and what they're seeing, but we could also talk about valuations. When
I'd like to do both, actually.
Yeah, emerging managers are putting money into companies, and they're like, hey, another YC company, let's do $10, $12 million valuation. End of the day, it's all about returns, right? I mean, and back to Ryan's point, yes, we like to give back to universities, but if we're taking somebody else's money, I think at the end of the day, it's like, how are we giving that money back? What does that multiple look like? So for Fund 2, let's talk about valuation first, and then we could talk about LPs. I think we have realized that we need at least 7 to 10% ownership, if not higher, maybe 11 to 15, in terms of pre-seed, right? And seed, we could probably get up to 7. And we can see that for deep tech, these are going to be big raises. You're talking about $30, $40 million, and sometimes in Series B, right? Or Series A could be 25 million. So we want to make sure we participate at least a portion, about 25 to 30% in Series A moving forward as well. And then we're just going to not participate anymore. So by the time there's M&A activity or an IPO, we like to target 1 to 2%, ownership at exit. Mm-hmm. So that's how we're kind of positioning Fund 2. But let's talk about valuation, because one is how much money you want to put into a company, right? And ownership. But we are valuation, sensitive in that sense, because you have to realize when we're looking at the university ecosystem and we're one of the first checks in, but we are definitely co-investing. We're not the only institutional check that goes into a company, but we can get really good valuations. We can get $3, $4, $5 million before they get into YC, right? Because a lot of our companies, 5 of the 20 have gotten into YC after the fact. So if we can get the valuation and the amount of ownership right at the early stage, I think that really plays a value in the long run. And that's how we're trying to differentiate ourselves to LPs, because you're like, okay, great. There are a lot of funds out there, but guess what? We can get really good valuation. We know the companies for 12 to 18 months because we know the university, we know the labs, we understand what's going on. And then on top of that, we can actually help them. We have that relationship with the founders that if we want to participate in Series A or Series B, we have the seed on the table. We always have seed. And my Series B company, even right now, said, hey, Deepak, how much do you want to put, right? So it's like, that's an open door that not many investors can have.
Mm-hmm. And, the access to early deal flow is key. And I imagine your LPs, that really hits home with them. How many of the deals that you look at or even participate in are part of the first money in, first priced round? if you will, as opposed to joining later stages?
All of them, Ryan. All of them have been co-investments or first check. Because our average, we were a small fund. So, our average check size is 150 to 200K. So having said that, we'll co-invest with some of the top tier investors. If they're raising $1 million, $2 million, we're one of the checks. But moving forward, I think we'll continue that strategy. We'll just take more of the pie initially.
Great. And I have to imagine that these companies are pretty excited to have Blue Bear Ventures on their cap table. I know when in the past we've been able to bring in some universities into our companies, small check amounts, but the logo saying that they have these universities invested is a real win for them.
Absolutely. I mean, for us, we're more relying on the reputation than anything else, because I think the trust and reputation right now, if you want, any potential LP could talk to any of our LPs or all 48 companies as references, right? Because if you're going to work with us, we want to be an open book in that sense that, how are we as LPs, or how are we to our LPs, but more importantly, how are we to our customers, which are these startup founders?
Right.
What do they think about us? And, what is that relationship and how have we helped? That is more important to us than anything else.
And I'm curious, I know you spoke specifically about yourself and the ability to come in and mentor students, especially in your role at Haas. From a Blue Bear Ventures perspective, what is the kind of the investment philosophy or the guidance that you give in terms of like all funds that we work with, right? It's not just money, it's money plus, right? Yeah. It's so what kind of guidance do you bring to your early stage companies? Where do you, besides money, where does Blue Bear Ventures really get in and help?
So working at Citrus Foundry and the incubator, we want to be the first call for any scientist CEO who's starting a company. That is our tagline. So
Citrus Foundry, sorry, Deepak, Citrus Foundry, is that?
Yeah. So citrusfoundry.org is a website, which was the incubator started at UC Berkeley. Okay. You can look at that. That was started in 2013 and still going on if you want to look at that. So Patrick, my partner, started that and left in 2018. But, if you look at the Citrus Foundry, and that's coming back to the original story and how many companies we helped at the Foundry, there were about 48 companies that raised north of $250 million. But if you come back and I forgot the question. Ryan.
Oh yeah, because I interrupted you. But Ryan's original question was, what do you guys provide on top of money? What's the team like, and what do you guys do? When do you dig in?
So for these scientist CEOs, we want to be the first call in, and when we get the call in, we provide is basically a structure of how you want to run your company for the next 12 to 18 months in terms of the board meetings. What are your milestones? What are your team looks like? So we come in, and we've done this at Citrus Foundry for many companies, right? How do you get a good team together to really get those mini milestones to get your fundraising? So we help from a tactical standpoint, but we also help where I come in, and personally, is from the finance standpoint, and really get into the numbers and make sure from the accounting perspective, as well as trying to build a company to a certain stage, that we know how much cash there is and what we're going to do in the next 6 to 8 months or 12 months, and when's the right time to go talk to certain, VCs to raise the next round.
Yeah, cool. I got us. Sorry, go ahead, Ryan.
I was to say that sounds so much like the role we play with our early stage companies.
That's what I was going to say.
Yes, such a benefit to have funds that have this level of assistance, especially first money in or early money before there's really much of any operations. It's mainly a couple of founders have a great idea, have developed some sort of proof of concept, but there's really not a business there. And to have support from a fund like you that can come in and say, look, this is, these are the things we need to do over the next 12 to 18 months to get ready for this next round, which hopefully is an up in value and an inflection point. So we got to prepare for it. And then again, that's a lot of what we do with our clients. So I really, really appreciate that message and look for funds that do this. It's a real value add.
Yeah, that's what struck me. As it sounds like Deepak's still doing some interim CFO work.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this then. You kind of leaning on that.
Old habits die hard.
Yeah, I was about to get on some of those old habits. So, some of your advice as an interim CFO to a young startup, and you've worked with many of those. Has the advice changed now that you've kind of, added to your role the venture capital, the investor hat?
Well,
what were you right about? What were you wrong about?
Yeah,
5 years ago.
that's great. That's a great question, actually. I mean, one thing is at that stage, at the first 18 months, when you don't expect anything, right? I understand we're funding them, but in the point of really working with entrepreneurs, because we're not taking board seats, we're not really controlling anything, and we don't want to take board seats. So they look at us as more of a trusted advisor. I mean, some of the questions that they've asked, they definitely don't want to ask any other investors, or they don't want to even ask, sometimes it's co-founder issues. It's like, who should I talk to? Oh, let me just talk to Deepak, right? Because he'll be neutral about it. That's the type of relationship that we're actually honing in on, because that's what we want to be known as. Somebody you can come in. We have companies that Patrick and Alec, my two partners, have looked at 2013, 2014. They got into Y Combinator in 2018. But they're still coming back to us, 2021, and they're asking very basic questions. That it might not be basic, but the point is, that's the relationship, even 7-8 years after the fact, right?
And one of the benefits of not being on the board, I guess they feel safe.
Yeah.
Coming to you, you're truly trusted. Yeah, makes sense.
Exactly. I mean, and I think that is a different relationship that, yes, we want them to do well, and board members do want to do. I mean, don't get me wrong, everyone wants them to succeed, but sometimes they're just trapped, right? It might be two investors on board or something like that, and they don't feel comfortable bringing this topic up. So it's like, okay, how should I do it, right? Or what are my options? I think that kind of, conversation, it's good to have early.
Yeah. Blue Bear, do you guys, how do you invest? What's the instrument? Is it, preferred priced round, or do you go safe route, or combinations?
So for the first 20 companies, majority of them have been safe. And we've been going with the safe because, when you do a first fund, you want to first prove to LPs that you have access and that you have co-investment. You're co-investing with top funds. And you're also getting into, step ups or exits or whatever you want to call it. So this proof of concept for Fund 1 is definitely there. I think moving forward to Fund 2, I already addressed this in terms of ownership, but I think we're probably going to continue some of the stuff that we did on Fund 1 in Fund 2.
Yeah, good stuff. So Deepak, your time as CFO, your time now still advising startups. I bet you always will be advising startups. As we kind of wrap up, and our audience is, of course, startup founders for the most part. What's on your mind today? What's the thing they should be looking at? Give them some help here.
I think for the audience, for the Keating audience, I will definitely tell them, keep track of your books and your numbers. Make sure you always keep all your receipts from day one, because it really will help you in terms of fundraising and just being diligent ready, right? So we want to make sure, even from day one, when you're dating and talking to a lot of different VCs and trying to figure out who are the right VCs or angel investors, you know how to present the data. I think that's really important. And second thing is expenses. Control your expenses. Right now, you might not have a board, but it's still important to show that discipline to a potential investor, to say, I know how to control my expenses and I know where to put the money in.
Well, thanks, Deepak. That was fun. Let's do this again a few months out. We'll hopefully have some interesting stuff. You can update us on Blue Bear and how it's going over there.
Yeah. Your new fund. That's exciting. That'd be fun to hear about that. Have you back on. Be our first repeat.
I would love that. Well, thank you, Trey. Thank you, Ryan. As always, please let me know how I can help. So thank you.
Nice.
Thanks. Bye, guys. Thanks, Ryan.